Hi, I'm Dana Bourgeois, Bourgeois Guitars. We're going to talk a little bit about Adirondack spruce. This is the pile of spruce that I just got, maybe about 20 sets here, maybe a couple fewer. We just got from our supplier. And I'm just going to go through and talk a little bit about some of the properties of this wood. Just this one off the top has a nice even grain, fairly white color, a little bit of dark grain down the middle. When I look at wood, the very first thing I do is I flex it across the grain and I feel the weight. Gives me and I'll flex it along the grain as well. That gives me a sense of the stiffness to weight ratio, which is very important to the sound of the guitar. Essentially, you want a very stiff and very light top. Light gives it responsiveness, and stiff means that you can make the top thin and therefore as light as it can be. This particular supplier does a very good job cutting the wood. The same piece of spruce that isn't cut directly on the quarter, I don't know if we can see that, but the grain line should be running right up and down, meaning that this piece of wood is taken from the middle of a log, the center being here and the edge being this way. It's called quarter sawn, and if it's cut right on the quarter, and if the lengthwise grain is running right along the matrix of the piece of wood as opposed to running out, then this piece of wood will be as stiff as it can be. In other words, the same piece of wood properly cut will be much stiffer than if it isn't properly cut. This is, like most Adirondack, is very stiff. This particular piece is what I'd call medium weight Adirondack. Adirondack spruce tends to be heavier than Sitka or European spruce or other types of spruce that's commonly used in guitar building. Let's see what it sounds like. First of all, it's nicely cut. It's a nice white top, good and stiff. Has some pretty good tone. A little bit heavier grain. The heavier, darker grain usually means that it's stiffer. Generally, heavier grain wood has to go on either a sunburst guitar or a lower grade guitar because people want to see nice, even white grain. That doesn't necessarily correlate to the way the guitar sounds, though. This set is even stiffer than the first set. It's actually a bit lighter. Along the grain and both across the grain, it's stiffer. I would expect it to sound a little bit nicer when I tap it, partly because the corners aren't cut, but also partly because I can just kind of feel it. One way you can get a feel for the sound of wood is just running your hands. I don't know if you can hear this on a little video, but just running your fingers, that just gives you a sense of how responsive it is. Let's listen to it when I tap. A little bit more defined sound than the first piece. Where you hold it is important, but a good piece of wood will respond when held in a number of different locations. There's a good ring, and that's what I'm listening for. Did I get a good tap tone out of it? A good, clear, musical, ringy kind of tap tone, holding in a number of locations. Let's try this one, my first one again. It sounds pretty good there. So it's actually sounding pretty good. Maybe the first place that I grabbed it wasn't a terribly responsive place. As I compared them side by side, they both sound actually pretty good. They're probably from the same tree, which is often a good indication, but not a perfect indication, of how similar a couple of pieces of wood will sound. Just going through the pile, just looking for different things. This one is a little bit whiter, one little line here. Good flexibility, actually very similar sound. Moving on to another piece. I don't know if we can see that. Fairly wide grain, but nice and even. I don't know if you can see any medullary ray. Medullary ray is the grain that's going across the longitudinal grain. It is only visible when the wood is cut perfectly on the quarter. Otherwise, you're actually revealing the edge of the medullary ray. So that's a good indication that the wood is properly cut. Fairly wide grain in the middle here. Some people prefer totally even grain. This is probably a very good sounding top, in spite of what the grain looks like. And again, the medullary ray is a good indicator, probably a better indicator than the width of the regular grain. I like to think that there's about a 75% correlation between the way a piece of wood looks and the way it sounds. Sometimes you get a piece of wood that's just dark grain, very wide, gnarly, all over the place, color streaks. Best sounding piece of wood in the pile. Other times you get perfectly straight grain, medullary ray, perfectly white, the kind of, piece of wood that looks like it was printed on a laser printer. And you go and flex it like this and you just curl it right around on top of itself. It won't make a good sounding guitar. Here's a good example of that kind, with the exception of a streak here. I don't know if you can see the medullary ray. Very pronounced ray, very close grain. For a small guitar, if we can cut this back a little bit and make a very small guitar, it'll be a perfect top. On the other hand, we don't make a lot of small guitars, so we may have to live with a stripe down the middle, or something like that might go in the sound hole. We might be able to cut it back to, say, beyond here, but there'll be a little stripiness in the middle. Unfortunately, it takes many decades to grow this tree, and I haven't been able to have total control over the way it grows, so I have to take what I get. Go for the things that make good sounding guitars and don't worry about the visuals. One more tap and we'll call it a day here. There we go.